Okay. Hi, everybody. Good night. I hope you're having a good night. Okay, I shared a link to the Google Drive for this week in the chat. So go down to the chat place, chat area, open the link, and you can download everything now, or you could download it when I tell you to. We might not get up to everything. That's kind of how it's been happening every single week, is that I'm usually cutting something out because um, I wanted to cover something, but then I didn't give myself enough time. All right, so let's start, shall we? Great. Okay. Open up the Q&A again. If you have any questions, pop them into the Q&A area. I'm going to keep that window open and not the chat window. So if you have any questions that you want me to see, put it in the Q&A, the question and answer window, and I'll be able to see it. Okay, so first, look, a very quick recap of what we spoke about last week. We spoke about grids. We spoke about one of the tools that designers use to create like a visual hierarchy and order is by using a grid. We spoke about Swiss design started in the 1920s and how a lot of the different themes or methods that they used are still being used in our current day-to-day design practice. Okay, and now this week we're going to talk about color. Okay, so there's a lot of psychology, or not psychology. If you search or research color in graphic design or art or architecture, you'll find plenty of videos and articles that, one moment. You find a lot of videos and articles that will try to break down what each color does and how it influences people and what emotion it arouses. And it kind of treats color as this very solid object, and we can easily pinpoint the experience that someone will experience when they see a color or come in contact with a color. So color is a very powerful tool in graphic design. So it's just important to know, just take this down, notes. So just important to know that there have been no really conclusive studies about the effects of color. So I wanted to preface that and talk about that a little bit because you can find plenty of books talking about how red means this and black means that. But when they actually studied them and tested them, the studies were inconclusive, and at best, the results of the effects of the color were very short term. So if they did observe any effects of the color, it was very short term. And the biggest problem with it is that when you do a study and you are, and you're doing a study with people, it's very difficult for the researchers to account for the experience that their test subjects have with a certain color. Meaning they can try to create a testing environment that's very non-biased, but at the end of the day, if one of their test subjects unknowingly had a negative experience with a red object in their childhood or something, and they may not even be aware of it, that will sway them to have a different reaction to the color. So that's very important. I guess it's good to know, meaning that there really is no absolute right way to use a color. Okay. However, when it comes to market research or more like consumer research, meaning how people buy things, they have found that color is effective in persuading people to pick an object off the shelf and purchase it. And it's almost 90% of a person's snap decision to pick an object off the shelf and put it in their basket can be attributed some way to color. Right. So, but we still said that. So the thing that we said before still stands, that there really is no absolute correct color to use. However, it's a lot more about thinking about the color within a category. So what I mean is that while we all have different reactions to colors in different ways, the context around the use of that color is usually what will tell us if it's appropriate or inappropriate, right? There are certain colors that are usually associated with food, and that will be considered correct for a food-related project. There are certain colors related with technology, and those would be correct for a technology project or project touching on technology. Right. So it's a lot less about us influencing them to, it's a lot less about us influencing people to buy products based on the color, and more like we're trying to present our product as a natural fit in a specific space, right? Okay. So I do want to share a little bit of the research, like I did some poking around about the psychology of color and to see if it was at all legitimate. So some of the effects that they do have about color and the use of color is somewhat interesting, and I wanted to share it. So, okay, so this is an example, before we get into the psychology of color, this is an example of how color could be used in many different settings. And it's about the context that it's presented in will tell us if it works or not. So we can look at, we have an example of how red is used in food, but then when also we look at the frame that says Vertigo on it, that's a still from the intro to a thriller movie. And in that case, the red is very unsettling. Right? It's not only the fact that it's close up to an eyeball, but it's also the shade of red. It's kind of ominous. So there's definitely ways to use color within context that will be that's what we should be going for versus going for the right color, right? So basically saying, let's ignore the general psychology around it and let's focus on what is appropriate for this project, what's appropriate for this space. Okay. Again, this is an example. This is a work by a graphic designer named Saul Bass. And here we see he's using a ton of different colors, right? So that's kind of throwing the argument, oh, only certain colors are appropriate and you should never use black or never use red because red means blood. This is an example of using a ton of different colors. And to me, in my opinion, this is very beautiful. And yeah, that's it. This is just an example how you can use a ton of different colors, and the effect of it is very much based on how it's presented. Okay, so let's talk about the color blue, or more like blue light. So some studies studies have shown that blue colored lights can lead to a reduced crime rate in the area where those blue lights were installed. But it wasn't informed by heavy research. It was more like what the people of the neighborhood said. So I just thought that was interesting, where like they do have a result of using the blue colored light, but it, again, couldn't be actually proven, I guess, because they didn't interview the criminals. Like, hey, were you dissuaded from doing crime in this area? Right? It's very difficult to test. So some studies around the color red. Red causes people to react with greater speed. So it activates a very energetic part of our brain, or the way we respond. And it's specifically very useful in kind of manipulating athletes. I don't know, manipulating, but helping athletes work just a little bit harder. or just move a little bit faster is employing the color red, perhaps in the uniform or in the playing field, etc. And it's very, I guess we can also say it's interesting that Coca-Cola has stuck to their specific shade of red throughout all of their campaigns and advertising and packaging. And it's probably because at this point we have a certain relationship with that color and how it relates to Coke. Meanwhile, black uniforms are more likely to receive penalties, right? So when talking about sports, when when an athlete is playing sports professionally, they're more likely to receive penalties. And in general, sports players who were wearing black were, when asked by test subjects, what do you think of these people? They would assume that these players had like negative qualities, almost like they liked the athletes less because of their uniform. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I'm also curious why. So like, for example, this photo, if why sports teams would include black, and maybe they don't care about those things. Maybe that's kind of part of their brand. Like, oh, we don't care if people don't like us. I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. Like, why would, if this information is out there, why would a sports team change the color of their outfit, of their uniform to be black if they knew that it wasn't, I missed something. Yeah, it did. If it wouldn't work, if it reflected poorly on their players. Okay, so now I'm going to bring some kind of fun information about cars. Okay, so when consumers were like in consumer research, blue was often described, or people driving blue cars were often described as stable and safety conscious. And in general, I guess within cars specifically, blue references stability and safety. Somehow we've developed this pattern of thinking that blue suggests those things. And I would assume that if you did like an audit of family-centered cars, you'd probably find a lot of different shades of blue being the car that most people choose to drive. They're looking for stable and safe, right? However, with red is bold, and it's very eye-grabbing. So for a car, it might mean, references usually like something about power, confidence. People who drive red cars, they're making a statement about their power, right? Their status in society, perhaps. Again, it's not like a hard science. Anyone could buy a red car, but there are associations we make with the kind of people who drive certain colored cars. And then finally, when through some research, they found that people generally thought that yellow indicated that the person driving the car was generally happier and therefore generally more likely to take risks, which I thought that was like a really interesting conclusion, because usually you think yellow is really nice and calm and I don't know, very, very friendly, but actually it almost indicated a sense of like, maybe I don't want to get in this guy's car. So think about that the next time you're taking a ride with someone. I'm kind of joking. And then some kind of, there's something called colorology. I've never heard of it before, but it's a form of alternative or holistic treatment. And they use color to stimulate or heal certain parts of a person's body or psyche. So red is used to stimulate the body and mind and to increase circulation. I assume blood circulation. Yellow is thought to stimulate the nerves and purify the body, and blue is believed to soothe illness and treat pain. So that, in my opinion, I'm not really keen on that approach, but I thought it was interesting that there were people that they gave color healing properties, and I thought that was very interesting. So I don't drive a car because I live in New York. I don't drive a car. Someone asked, what color car do I have? Okay, so I am going to go to a website called color.adobe. Color.adobe. And you can follow along, but you don't have to. I'm just going to just kind of like continuing the lecture a little bit. Okay, so this is a website by Adobe, and it's really, really great. You don't actually have to have an Adobe account. You can see I'm not signed in. Like anyone can access this, and there's really a ton of different ways to get colors. And I would assume that, considering that you all signed up to this graphic design course, that you're all familiar in some way of the use of color in, you know, in some attractive, pleasing way. But how do we choose? There are so many colors, right? How do we choose a nice pairing of colors? So I would like to say that at the end of tonight's class, you will have some really cool steps to coming up with lots of different color palettes, and then choosing the one that works for you best. So first, let's talk about terms and definitions. I'm just going to use this screen, or this window over here to explain it. So for the first few words I'm going to introduce are hue, saturation, or value, otherwise known as brightness. The terms are used interchangeably. So hue is another word for color, okay? Hue and color means the same thing. Saturation means the intensity of the color, and we can imagine saturation as a scale from gray to a very bright version of our color. So if you look at the bottom left of my screen, we see it says H for hue, saturation, S, and B for brightness. Okay, so hue, in the hue slider, I slide it along, and that will change. Let me go. It's probably easier. Yeah. Okay. So, right, and whenever I slide it, it changes the color. Great. Okay. Now, with saturation, we're basically adjusting the amount of gray that's in our color. I thought that was very interesting, right? So if I move it all the way to the left, then my color is gray. And then if I move it to the right, I have this very rich, what color would that be? Teal? No, teal would be B. And then finally, brightness is, to make this right, brightness is really how much black is in our color. And it kind of, we can imagine that it ranges from black to white, although here, right, we're including a lot of white in our color. I don't know if that's accurate, but here it's black, right? So brightness is really adjusting the amount of light, and then the saturation is adjusting the richness of the color. So they're similar, but they are different. They give you different colors. Okay, so now let's talk about some very, very basic color palettes. So what you're looking at here, it's called a monochromatic color palette. It basically means that it's a single color with different shades and or different values to it, right? So if we turn our attention to the bottom row, and let me know if this is a good way to see this. So we can see that I'm getting, how many is this? It's 5 colors, but they're all adjusted differently. Slightly, the saturation or the brightness is adjusted to give me a range of colors, but they're all of the same hue. Okay, they're all of the same hue. And that means that I could create some very nice, right? Here, we can see that these are using even a very wide range of colors, changing the saturation and value, but it's staying the same hue, okay? And I'm sure for some people this might be repetitive, but I think it's great to go over it. I definitely benefited from this refresher. So this is called monochromatic, and we can see if we look at our left-hand area, we see that it kind of has these presets that'll show me these different levels, these different arrangements of color. So we're right now in the monochromatic area, and I'm going to go to the analogous area. Analogous uses colors right next to my chosen color. So I have my main color, which if we go to the monochromatic area, we can see that A is my main color. If I go to analogous, it's now spreading out right and left and picking colors right next to it. And that's one step more complex than monochromatic, right? So now, now the hue is also changing. So before it was just the saturation and the brightness, but now it's also the hue, the color itself is changing, but they're very similar. They're still very similar. And just, right, we can still see that it looks pretty cohesive. It looks pretty collected, I would say. And monochromatic, mono means singular, and chroma, I believe, means color. So monochroma would mean a single color. And then analogous would be, well, like the word analogy, where you have, I guess it's used to describe things that are next to each other or parallel, right? Next to each other, like shoulder to shoulder. And I guess that's a way to imagine analogous, is that the colors are shoulder to shoulder. And then finally is the complementary. And we're not going to go through all of these, at least not today. Complementary is colors that are opposite each other on what obviously we can easily learn that this is called a color wheel, right? This is a wheel of color. And so monochromatic, they are of the same, in the same kind of line of the color wheel. Not all color wheels look like this, so I'm not going to focus too heavily on how this one is structured. But here's an example of how my A, the color I chose before, this color on the left of this row of colors, and then it's being paired with colors on the opposite of that. Right, so let's go to blue just. Right, so blue and yellow. Blue and yellow, they're complementary. They're not next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, they're exactly across. Okay, great. So that's, we're going to go into this further, but what I want to do is I want us to open Illustrator. And create new. And okay, great. It doesn't really matter what size document you make it, but I guess for if you want to follow along exactly, I made a document letter size. You can make it any size you'd like. Doesn't really matter. Okay. Ooh. That's not what I wanted to happen. Okay. So first I want us to make some boxes, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to create some color palettes together. And what we should focus on really is the process of how we do this and not really the result, right? Because right now we're just learning, we're learning how to use the program, we're learning how to create color palettes. So it's more about how do you do this? And then on your own time, you could definitely perfect it and you could go over it a lot more thoroughly. So I'm just going to make a box. And I'm going to fill it with black. And I'm going to take out, remove the outline, the stroke by using the / on my keyboard. But you could also just hit this little box over here. Okay, so I want, actually, let's just keep it to one box right now. Okay, great. So I'm going to change the color of my square to using how we change the fill in general. We'll go to the left-hand panel. We'll go to this area over here on the bottom of the left-hand panel where there are two big boxes. I'm going to double click on that, simple like that. Let's pick a color. It's not hard to look at. I'm going to pick this, right? Great. Oops. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to start creating our color palettes. So let's double click on that again, and I want to show you something. Actually, let me. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so this is our color picker. I'll show you why I cut it out. And what I want you to imagine is, and by the way, I learned a lot of this from a lot of the ways to explain it, because this is really not something that I think about so explicitly. So I learned a lot about like the terms that I use from a YouTube video that I'll be happy to share with you guys that you can review and get really, really great at your color. So let's say that, I'll just change that. Okay, that is really bad. Okay. Okay, great. So let's imagine that this green dot is where the current color of my box is. And let's imagine that this circle over here is kind of informs, or like the closer I get to the closer my circle gets to over here, to the bottom right of kind of my curve, the darker and the more, what would be the phrase? This is kind of how we would control the brightness, right? So moving it up here would control the brightness. And then moving it towards here would control the saturation. But it kind of moves at a same rate when you, let me show you. I just want to help you visualize this, okay? So, move that away. Okay, so I have my color picker open, and, sorry. Okay, so I have my color picker open, and let's just imagine, let's superimpose that curve, okay? So when I want to make I'm going to make first a set of lighter colors and then a set of darker colors, and using this purple as the base, okay? So imagining that I have that, that I have that curve, and we want to make lighter colors, I'm going to move it up the curve like that, okay? And I'm also going to adjust the color a little bit. I'm going to move it a little away from purple and more towards the light blue, okay? And let me just do this one more time. I want to give you like a quick understanding of how this would work. So this is, again, my main color. And let's actually make it a little richer just so the contrast is more apparent. And I'm not seeing that. Why am I not seeing that? Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so now we have this light purple, and I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to move the area of my color towards the white part, right? I'm going for lighter shades, And I'm also going to, again, scoot the hue slider down a little bit, again, towards the green. Okay. Maybe let's do that even one more time. And okay, great. So how do we get the color picker? So when we make a shape, that's the best way to find it. Select the shape that you made, and then the left-hand panel, on the bottom part of your left-hand panel, you will see two boxes. And what I'm doing is I'm double-clicking on the fill box. We spoke about how to change your fill and how to change your stroke. So it's simply just double-clicking, and that pulls up this dialog called the color picker. And we're going to actually pick apart the color picker more thoroughly. Okay. So now let's make some darker shades. So I'm going to, I'm moving my shape over at a perfect line by holding Shift and Alt and then dragging. And this time we're going for darker shades, right? So we're going to move it the lower end of our curve. Just do that. And this time I'm going to move it up towards the pinks, like that. How does that look? That looks great, right? That looks great. So let's continue to do that. And lower down. Ooh, it's getting really dark. Nah, not enough contrast there. Okay, let's just continue on for demonstration's sake. And this is a way to get a bunch of different color options from a maybe, I don't know. Let's do that. No, I don't know. Okay, let's say that's good enough for now. Okay, so now we have our main color, and now we have 3 darker shades and 3 lighter shades. So great, awesome. Now, how could we make even more colors from this? So first, a really cool trick to make more colors is make a box over all of your boxes. And that's what I just did. I made a box. It doesn't have to fit perfectly over it. And now let's say I want to introduce some yellow, like a brighter shade of yellow. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is last week we spoke about blending modes a little bit, right? So we can go to Window or Transparency, it's called. We'll go to Window, Transparency to pull up our Transparency window. And I just want to show you very quickly what I'm doing. I basically kind of cheated, but I introduced a yellow to my shapes, and I just made an entirely new color palette where every one of those shapes has now a value of yellow. And we can do this with, right? Let's say we just wanted to warm it up, or maybe we want to make it colder. Now I just added blue to that, okay? So this is not a monochromatic color palette. This would probably be more like an analogous color palette where the colors are kind of close to each other on the spectrum. And then I can throw in another wild color and maybe see if I like what I've got. Someone asked, how do you copy the squares? So the way you copy the squares, again, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but the way I'm doing it is I'm holding Shift and Alt on my keyboard at the same time while I'm selecting and dragging. And that's how I'm getting all of my objects into a single line. Okay, so I wanted to show you a couple of other things. When you do create a color that you like, let's say that in this color palette we really like one of these colors. Maybe I really like this this light blue. Okay, so there's something called the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool basically selects colors of something and captures it. You can use it with photographs that you import into Illustrator. You can use it on colors like these, and I'm going to show you how to use the eyedropper tool. Okay, so the first way to easily do it is hit I on your keyboard, and then we have something that looks like an eyedropper, kind of like something that you give medicine to kids with, right? Eyedropper. Another way to do it is going to the left-hand panel and looking for something that looks like the eyedropper. I think it's a lot easier to just hit I on your keyboard to pull it up. And then what you do is you simply go over to the object that you want to select. Okay, so let's see, I like this shade of blue. With the eyedropper tool, I've selected it. Now it doesn't look like anything happened, but we can see that on the left-hand panel, there's a new color there loaded, right? Right before it was purple, and now it's light blue. Actually curious. So okay, I haven't figured that out yet. Okay, I have this light blue. So nothing happens. However, when I select a shape and then I use the eyedropper tool to pick a color from another shape, we see that now the shape that I was selecting adopts that property. So let's do that one more time, right? I'm pressing I on my keyboard to pull out my eyedropper tool, and any color that I click on changes that color. Now, what I didn't realize, I just kind of like a disclaimer, what I didn't realize is that by overlaying a color over a bunch of shapes, and then I select one of those colors, it just selects the top color. So I need to come up with a way to override that, and I'll share that with you. So right, we have the eyedropper tool. It's as simple as that. Anything you select, let me select an image. Okay, let's say I selected a screenshot of my color picker. That's what this is. It's a screenshot, so it's an image. With my square selected, I press the I for eyedropper tool, and now I could pick the color in my image. You can use it for photographs and art and illustrations. Very cool. Okay. And now there's one more thing I want to introduce, and that is, how do you save a color that you really like? So obviously one way is to just have a bunch of these squares of selecting different colors you like and just setting it on the side, maybe setting it on a different layer and locking that layer so that your colors don't get deleted by accident. But there's a much more efficient way to do that. So that's a valid way to do it, but there's a more efficient way to do it, which is that selecting the object which has the color that I want to save, I can go and open something called my swatches. And swatches is basically your saved colors. So opening the window menu and opening swatches, okay? And the icon for that is a bunch of, put that back in my right-hand panel. It's just a bunch of squares. It kind of looks like a palette of colors in grayscale in black and white. Okay, so now that I have my swatches panel open, we can see it says swatches. And with my shape that I want to save is selected, let's turn our attention to the bottom row, all the way at the bottom row of icons in the swatches panel. Is everyone with me so far? I want to make sure everyone can see the swatches panel. So if you can't see it, let me know. Okay, I'm going to assume that everyone can see it and that I'm going to move on. So if you don't see it, you have to go, if you don't see it, you have to go to your Windows panel, the drop-down Windows panel, and you have to go to swatches. You have to scroll all the way down to the S and select swatches. And a window will pop up on your right-hand side. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is how to save a swatch. We can see a bunch of preset colors, and these are all preset colors, and I can select any of them, and my shape will adopt that color. So that's really neat. It's a great place to start, by the way. But I want to show you how to save a color, and that's really simple. At the bottom row of icons, there's a little box with a plus in it. And when you hover over it, it says new swatch. And then this dialog window will come up. Right now, let's ignore all the different information and let's just click OK. Okay. And now what we see, it is small. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Yeah, I could. Okay, great. I normally don't have it this size. It's very big, but I want to show you how this works. So now we have this square with a little notch at the bottom right, and that tells me that this is a custom swatch that I set. So these are all presets, and this is a custom one that I just put in, and I can do that for any color, right? I select the shape with the color that I want to save. I select create new swatch at the bottom right, and now I have swatch. I could do that. I can save as many swatches as I like. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not seeing any trouble. Perfect. Okay, good. Now let's put that away for now. And let's go back and let's talk a little more in detail about colors, using colors within Adobe Illustrator. So we spoke about color in general, and we spoke about how colors work in general. And that works with paint, that works in photography and film, all over. But we're going to talk about how it works specifically with regards to like graphic design and Adobe Illustrator, okay? So the first thing we have to be aware of is that there are two different ways color is processed. And the first is called RGB. It stands for red, green, and blue. And that basically means that all of the colors that we see in our screen are made up of these three colors. I think that's right. It's made up of lights, of green, yellow, and blue lights. And the way they kind of combine is the color that we see, right? And I'm just going to toggle between this. And CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And I know the K should really be a B. I don't know why it's a K. I have no idea. But CMYK is how color is processed in print, right? So RGB is from digital screens, and it's how screens, digital platforms process color, and CMYK is for print. And that is somewhat important with regards to how our designs will be rendered on different platforms. So very quickly, if we create something in RGB and we want to print it, the color will be off. It will be different because the way that RGB translates color doesn't transfer seamlessly to a CMYK to a print platform. And that means usually in RGB, we have a lot more options. There's a lot more flexibility. You can use any color you want in RGB on a digital interface. On a digital interface. And CMYK is a lot more limited because CMYK uses physical ink, right? So there is not a, I'm sure there is, but usually the printer or wherever we're printing our design does not have an unlimited amount of ink. It's pretty locked in. So that's just good to know off the bat. Okay, so the biggest difference, the reason why I'm showing you these graphics is because RGB is additive, which means that the more colors you add in an RGB platform, it becomes white, and CMYK it becomes black. And we can see that these different colors are layered, and there's some kind of overlay, and we can see that we have black over here. Make sure cover that. Okay, great. And I'm going to show you how to change your color modes in Illustrator, because sometimes we want to use RGB, sometimes we want to use CMYK. The biggest difference really is when you're printing something, you should make sure it's in CMYK, but there is no harm done in designing something for social media or a website in CMYK. I mean, it limits you, but I don't think as far as I understand, there's not a real problem. It's more like kind of like vectors and rasters. Like RGB has a lot more information, a lot more possibilities, and CMYK has fewer possibilities. And it's just, you want to be designing within the limitations of how your projects will look at the end of the day, right? So you don't want to print a poster or something, some printed material, and find out that the color you were seeing on your screen is totally off. So that's like the first two distinctions between print and digital. Now, this isn't really limited to print and digital, but it's something that it's very much easier to do on screens. It's called a gradient. The gradient is a blend of two colors. We can see that this light pink and this orange, right, is blended, and they kind of seamlessly change in this second square on the right, and that's called a gradient. Finally, there's something called, well, no, not finally, but something called a hex code. It has a very long, hex is short for something, but this is used usually on like HTML and CSS. Like web design and development and app design. And it's basically a code for your RGB, for your digital colors. And that's basically it. It's just a very convenient way. Like I like using my hex code to transfer colors from Photoshop to Illustrator. And I'm going to show you everything. So if this doesn't click immediately, that's fine. I'm going to show you how to manage all of that. Okay, then finally we have something called Pantone colors, and Pantone colors it's like it's a code system for basically every single color, every single shade that you will need ever. And I think you have to pay for these books. But basically, by using Pantone colors, you are getting the most accurate when you print your printed material. You're getting the most accurate color possible. So whatever you see on your screen is exactly what you're going to get in print. And that's very important, especially when you're printing a book and you're printing a 5,000 pieces of something, 5,000 books or 1 million books or 5 million books. You want to make sure that everything is really, really consistent. To the point that certain companies own kind of the Pantone code, and for, I don't know if it's only to the Pantone code, but there's like, Tiffany and Co., a jewelry company, they have their own shade of teal, and that shade they own. And if you use that shade, you're copyright infringement. Or the Coca-Cola, I presume, probably has their own exact code that they use a single shade of red in every single application, digital and physical. So I want to introduce you to a rule that's just good to know, keep in the top of your mind. It's called the 60-30-10 rule. What a terrific name. It's basically a rule. It's basically a rule that's it's very prominent in filmmaking and photography and interior design. And I'm going to show you a few examples. But the idea is that you have 60% of one color, and that makes up more than half of your visual of your design. Then you have 30%, which is like the secondary color, and then 10%, which is the accent color. And we can imagine, yes, when you have over 60% of something, it's probably going to be it's the main color, and it's not super overwhelming. And then going all the way to the 10%, that's going to be the color that's very eye-catching, and therefore you want to use it to catch someone's eye and not to overwhelm them. So here's an example of how the rule is being used in in a certain movie. And so something misleading is that the bottom bars, they're showing that these colors are being used. This is like the color theme of the movie, these three main colors. So the bottom bars are not really adjusted to show how it's being used in 60%, 30%, and 10%, but we could see how there's the red is the accent color, it's the 10%. Then the brown, just something that I noticed, is the brown is the 60% color almost all the time throughout the movie. And then this kind of bluish gray is the secondary color. So if I would redesign this, that's how I would show it. The red is the accent, and we can see especially at the bottom screen, the brown is definitely the 60%, and then the blue is the secondary. You see that in the shirt that this person's wearing. Here's a better example. Here's a website, right? So 60% of it is white, 30% of it is black, and then purple is the accent. Honestly, it looks like purple is being used a little more than 10% of the time, but this is the general idea. And then it also is very popular in interior design, where you have a main color that sets the general mood of the room, and it's not very overwhelming. It kind of just subtly influences the vibe. Then you have 30%, which is probably the color you're most aware of, in the fact that it appears probably many, many different places. But again, it's only secondary. And then 10 is the feature color. So this is just a good way to limit your project at the beginning so that you don't get overwhelmed at tons and tons of colors. Be okay, what's my 60%? What's my 30%? What's my 10%? And trying to keep that visual balance available. So the final thing, and again, this is just something good to know, is that there is something like called accessibility. This is very popular in like web and app design, and this is really about having in mind that people see color very, very differently. So, and what I'm talking about specifically is color blindness. Now, I have two statistics, which is one that color blindness is apparent in 1 out of 12 men and 1 out of 200 women. Every 1 out of 200 women have color blindness. And color blindness doesn't mean that they're blind, and also doesn't mean that they see in black and white, but it means that they see colors, their color cones or eye cones are damaged, and it means that they process colors very differently than the typical way. And this is just a quick screenshot of what it would look like to have color blindness. So the left is the very normal, kind of expected way that this image would look like. And then you have people who I guess they can't see red and green, so they filter out red and green, and they're processed in different shades of gray. And this is an example, they can't see blue and yellow. And again, it's processed with these grays. I guess this is more like a green, I don't know. So why is that important? I don't know, because I don't really account for that most of the time, but I just think it's good to know, especially when you're designing a website or something like that. You have to make sure that you are designing appropriately for that, for color blindness. And yeah, I'm not going to actually go into it too in depth, but it's definitely something that we could talk about more in depth. We're just not going to get into it today. Okay, good. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Google Drive, and I'm going to download a folder called Shapes. It's really an Adobe Illustrator folder. I'm going to right-click, download. And the link is in the chat. So if you don't have the link, just go to the chat area. Okay, good. And I'm going to open it up in my folder. So this is what I see, right? My layers, I have a background layer that's locked, so we can't edit the background. It doesn't move around. And I guess I'm going to keep it like this for now. And okay. Okay, was everyone able to download this folder? If you couldn't, let me know. You can. And if you have, and if you couldn't, I'll put it in the question and answer chat box. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in the question and answer chat box, which is what I'm looking at. So we're going to start talking about how to change your file, your Illustrator file from CMYK to RGB very, very simply. Okay, are we good to go? Awesome. So, a second. Okay, so what we want to do is super simple. We're going to go to File, okay? Okay, I reposted. Some people having trouble with the link. I reposted the link to the chat. Again, if you have questions, put it in the question and answer window. I would really appreciate that. And then we're downloading the shapes.ai file in the in the drive, in the class 8, if that helps. Okay, so I want to make sure everyone is with me. Okay, so we go to File. It's very, very simple. We go to File, and we go scroll all the way down. There's class 08. There is class 08 in the Google Drive. Someone's having trouble with that. Okay, we'll go to File, Document Color Mode, and now we see that CMYK is checked off. Again, CMYK. I wish I came up with some abbreviation for how it stood for print, but it stands for print. And then RGB. So it'll be good to come up with some kind of abbreviation for what it stands for. Really great blues or something, and that just means that it's good for screen. So if I select RGB, nothing really changed, but I'll show you what actually does change. Okay, so let's open a color picker, and let's just for let's change it back to CMYK. I'm going to make a box. Let's open a color picker. So I'm in CMYK and CMYK mode, and I'm going to move my little circle that tells me what color I'm picking all the way to the top right corner, right? So the most saturated, richest color of like salmon color, right? I select that. And now I don't need to select the box. That's unnecessary, but now I'm going to change my color mode to RGB. And let's see what happens, okay? So with the box that I just made selected, we can see that I kind of have more, there was new colors introduced, right? There were new colors introduced. And we can see that because in CMYK, I had reached the most saturated, brightest, the most saturated color of the salmon color. But in RGB, I'm shown that there's actually more colors I could pick from that were not available to me in CMYK. So that's a really great way to see that in practice. So that's really, really simple. Another thing that you could do, another way that you could switch is, right. So let's go to our window and open our color window. So go to window, the window drop down, and then go to color and open that. And just hide this for now. And what we see is, so now that we are in, so this color window is still rendering things in CMYK. And since we're in RGB, I want to be able to edit things in RGB. So I hope I'm explaining this succinctly or clear enough. There's a little menu. It's called a hamburger menu at the top right of our color window. These three horizontal bars. And when I click on it, it shows me a couple of different options. It shows me grayscale. It shows me RGB, CMYK, and web safe RGB, and etc. We're just going to change it to RGB, which means that now it's showing my color values as red, green, and blue. Okay. If I select HSB, if we remember, HSB just stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. And then finally, CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So we're going to go to the RGB kind of color editing window, and this will allow you to edit very specific properties of your color. I don't normally use this, at least definitely not at the beginning of a project, because I'm more into getting a rough idea of how things look, and then I might edit specific shades and tints of my color. And there's one more thing I want to introduce, and then I want to start editing these shapes, which I hope some of you have already started. So there's something, so we learned how to make swatches, right? We learned how to make our own swatches, our own little colors, but there's something really cool. It's called a global color. And if we can imagine, a global color is every object that's given that color will be affected if I make any changes to that color swatch. So let me go ahead and show you an example. I'm going to select a couple of triangles, and I'm going to give it this red color, okay? Let me close that. Just drop it back in there. Okay, so I colored a couple of these triangles. And now if I double click on that swatch, the swatch options window pops up, and CMYK red, whatever, color mode RGB. That's just the name of a swatch. I can name the swatch to cherry if I want. It doesn't really doesn't indicate what that color value is. But if I select global, what that will now do is say that any color that's given, any object that's given that color, let's make that red. Okay, so now we have these different shapes that are that color. I'm going to go back into that swatch, and I'm going to edit it. Okay, I'm going to change the red and move it to black. Let's say, I don't know, make it green. Boom, right? All the colors that were given that swatch kind of took on the new color properties, right? So that's pretty cool. That's very, very convenient. So I would definitely suggest that when you're using color in some kind of illustration, make sure that your swatches are global so that if you decide later on to change your whole color palette, you won't have to go in and select every single object with a color. You could simply go into the global swatch and adjust the settings. Right? And all we have to do to adjust, to turn the global, is by double clicking on the swatch that we want to edit. And yeah, this will only work, this will only change things within your immediate project. But again, it will change everything that's given that color. So if you want one global red and one non-global red, you could do that. You could have two shades of red or two colors of red. One could be called global red, one could be called just red. And only what is applied to the global red will be changed. So it's not about how it looks to you, it's about actually what shapes you attached to that object. And again, what will happen if I give, I don't know, if I give this rectangle a blue and then right, so we see that the global box is unchecked and I change it to pink, nothing changed to this rectangle. I'm sorry, to this triangle, okay? So what I wanted us to do, what I think would be kind of cool. And I wanted to show you one more thing, actually. When I open my color picker, there's at the bottom left corner, there's something that says only web colors. And what that basically means, is that those colors are, these only show colors that will be rendered by all web browsers at the same kind of richness, same quality. So unless you're working on a web-based project that demands perfect consistency of color, I don't use it, but I guess it's good to know. Okay. Okay. So what I wanted us to do is to go ahead and recolor this artwork. Okay, and because I have my background layer locked, I'm going to unlock it so I can make duplicates of it. And I actually I can press Control A. You open the color picker by going to the the left-hand panel at the bottom. And there's two shapes. There's the fill and stroke, and you double click on one of them to change either the fill color or the stroke color. So I'm going to press Control A on my keyboard, and that will select everything that is in my file. Okay. But since this is all that I have in this file, I don't mind to select everything. And I'm going to press Alt Shift, click, sorry, I'm copying it. Another way you can do this is Control C, Control F on your keyboard. That will also make a copy, paste it on top. Or you can Control C and then go to Edit, and then there's different paste settings. Guys, give me 1 second. My baby woke up, so give me a minute. Okay, great. So I just want to make a duplicate to kind of keep what I had. So I'm just going to Alt Shift, click drag to make an easy copy. And now let's make a monochromatic pattern. So I'm going to go back and lock my bottom layer. It's not that important that you do this, but if you do want to lock something, you can right click on it and you will have options to lock or unlock that object. Will you? No, you won't. You go to, if you want to lock something, you go to object and then lock, selection, etc. Okay, but it's not super important for right now. So let's make some monochromatic colors. Right, and we do that by adjusting. We do that by adjusting the saturation and the value. So I'm going to make a box. Let's make that blue. I'm going to make a couple of copies. Let's do it that color. And now I'm going to open my color window. We open our color window by going to Window, scrolling down to Color, and now our color window pops up. Okay. And then once I open my color window, so I want to first make sure, is everyone able to open their color window? Is everyone able to go open their color window? If you are not able to, let me know. Okay, so I'm not getting any comments. You can't open it. Go to Window, Color, and then it would appear, it could appear as a flyout window on your right-hand panel. Now, what we want to do for people who are able to, and I'm going to make sure everyone can, but if people are able to, I want you to then open that little kind of hamburger menu at the top right of your color window. Like there are more color options, and I want you to change it to HSB, right? Hue, saturation, and brightness. And I want you to create maybe 4 to 5 different 4 to 5 different, sorry, levels of saturation and brightness. So someone says that they can only see a black swatch. So I'm not looking at my swatches panel. I'm actually looking at my color panel. They're different. Swatches are preset colors or saved colors, and the color window is going to be a couple of sliders, like what you have over here. This is color. This we can hide. I'm not looking at that now. Okay. Let's say I want to adjust. Okay, great. So I'm going to make a lighter swatch, kind of pastel, and I'm going to make a darker swatch. Right, and here I'm just adjusting the brightness and not adjusting the saturation. Let me make another one, make that much lighter. I'm not adjusting the color at all. I'm not adjusting the hue. I'm only adjusting the saturation. I'm only adjusting the brightness. Okay. So now we have this really nice palette, and I would actually say push it a little bit to the extremes. So no, it's too similar. Ooh. I guess this is in a good place. And now let's go ahead and change the color. Oh, well, actually, let me show you even a better thing about this. So I have these 5 swatches, and you could actually upload or save a whole group of swatches. So I showed you how to save individual swatches, but you could save a whole group of swatches. That's really great. So again, right, if you had a project and you have a bunch of colors that you really liked, you could import them all into your library. And then maybe later on, we'll go into how you could actually pass on color, like color groups. You could save them as files on their own and then pass them on to people. Let's say for a client, you want to give them the actual Illustrator swatches so that they can give it to their designer, and their designer can upload it to their swatches panel, their swatch library. So you're able to do that, but we're not going to learn how to do that today. I just wanted to let you know that that was possible. So we have these 5 different shapes. I'm sorry, 5 different colors. And all I have to do right next to the add swatch, add the new swatch. So at the bottom right of our swatch panel, so there's a color panel and a swatch, and we can tell them apart because it says different names at the top of it. There's a little folder, new color group, right? So just like new color swatch, and we do selected swatches and select that. Actually, undo that. Okay, and now I have 5. So let me redo that just in, okay. What you want to have selected is selected artwork, convert process to global, includes swatches for tints. That's what you want to have selected. And you could give it a name. Let's give it a name, class. Okay, and now this little notch at the bottom tells me that it's a global color, right? Which means that anything given that color property will change according to that. And I'm going to just drop that back in there for clarity's sake. So now let's go ahead and change the colors of our pattern. So far, is everybody with me? If you're not with me, let me know, and let me know how I could address that. So if you're not with me, let me know what you aren't able to. And for everyone who is, go ahead and start changing, using your swatches. Go ahead and change each element. How do you get those colors there? So I just made these colors. Oh, and you're probably, so some people are saying black and white. That might be because you downloaded a file off the internet. You downloaded my file. A very easy way. Let me just make these large so you guys can see. It's good enough. Okay, so what I did is I made a couple of squares and I changed them individually. And you can change squares individually, square, and then go into the color picker, giving them a color, and then opening the windows, the color panel. Is everyone able to do that? Sometimes the way you transfer files changes certain things about the file. So I can't always know what it looks like on your end. And I guess so how do you upload, so to go over how you upload your swatches to your panel, you select the objects with the color, just like we uploaded a single swatch. It's very similar to how we upload many swatches or many colors. We do that by selecting all the objects, and then right next to where we would add a swatch, there's a folder icon that says new color group, right? It's to the left of that. Okay, and that's how you do it. You click that folder and this little dialog pops up, and then you don't want to click selected swatches. You want to select the button that says selected artwork. It's basically saying that these squares are being rendered or recognized by Illustrator as artwork, and we want to grab the color from that and put it in our color library. If you're, so someone says you're seeing it sounds, so someone saying that swatches are showing it as a stroke, as a line instead of boxes. That might mean that you have to toggle from a line to box. Again, I can only imagine what that looks like. And how do you get specific colors into your swatch library? So again, it's what happens when you download stuff. So I guess that was something I couldn't account for. I didn't test that. Maybe, so everyone can, if you turn your attention to my screen, you'll see, I think this should solve your problem. If we open our swatches window, and again, let's turn our attention to the bottom row of icons. At the bottom left, there is something that, if you look very closely, looks like books. Okay, and this is a preset of a swatch library. It's presets that Adobe Illustrator gives you. And what I would recommend is opening that up and going to default swatches and going to art and illustration. Okay, and now what you have is a bunch of these swatches, a bunch of default swatches, and you should be able to, right. So, let's see, a really simple way to do this. No. So if you want to upload all of them, to your main swatches window, follow what I do. Okay. So I'm going to select the white box. First of all, is everyone able to see that? If you're not able to see, if you can't find the default library of swatches, let me know. Okay, so I assume that we can. So the way we do it is we select the white box, holding down Shift. I'm going to go to the very last swatch in this library. And now we can see that they all have this white outline indicating that they are selected. And then we could drag them into our main swatch window. Okay, do we see that? We click off, and now they've all been loaded in. So that's what happens sometimes, especially when an item is being transferred over the internet or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. Certain settings are changed. So I'm going to do this very quickly. We're going to make all these same color. Let me actually use swatches. We're going to do this for a few more minutes and then cover one more thing. I don't know, I'm not applying any real science to this. I'm just trying to give this a cohesive look. Are there any outstanding things I could go over for anybody while we're just going to go ahead and applying our monochromatic color palette to this simple design. And go ahead and destroy this design after class. Like, I don't know, pick it apart, delete parts and pieces. Create your own. That's really the goal. I don't know. Okay. So I'm not seeing any outstanding questions. So that's good. So I wanted to cover one more thing in the lecture, and you don't have to, you can continue doing this if you'd like, and maybe make another set of monochromatic colors and apply it to the pattern again, or maybe mix it up and make it really, really funky. If you created anything that you really like, feel free to share it with me. You can email it to me or something. Although we haven't spoken about how to we haven't spoken about how to save stuff. So I think I want to make sure that we talk about that. At the end of today, I want to talk about how do we save objects or things that we make in Adobe Illustrator. But first, I want to cover one more thing. Okay, so let's talk about something called mind maps. I wanted to present this kind of method of coming up with a ton of different ideas in a very short period of time. So instead of like taking a week to kind of let something kick around in your mind and like, oh, I need an idea for this, I need an idea for that, and like fret about it, a way to generate a ton of ideas very, very quickly is something called a mind map. And there's a line that says the way to a good idea is to come up with many ideas, right? So that's really the only way you're going to come up with a great idea, a concept or design or book cover, packaging, anything like that. So this is basically what a mind map looks like. A mind map starts with the basic ideas that you have already. So let's say you're working on a logo for a waffle shop. You would put down waffle as the main thing, and let me know. So I'm going to go over this very generally, but let me know if this is something you actually want to maybe practice making or practice going over. If I don't get any feedback, if no one's doesn't seem interested, I'm not going to spend time on it. I mean, this is mostly kind of like a cool method, but it's not necessary. So we start with like the main theme, the main idea, and then we break off from it, and we just use our ability to associate things to just write down tons of different ideas, and it can spread out as far as we would like, as far as the space we give it. So let's say a waffle shop, we can write family centered, we can write food, we could write Belgium, we could write blue, we could write I don't know, it's located in Pittsburgh, we could write Pittsburgh, and then we can start extending that to very different details. We can write the Steelers, we can write the Pittsburgh Penguins, we can write Yellow Bridges, we can write Europe, right? And we can break it out further and further until we have a ton of different words that we can start developing our ideas and start developing our concepts off of, right? And breaking away. We start with the obvious, we start with the literal, and we break away until we're more in a metaphorical, conceptual space. So yeah, depending on the kind of feedback I'll receive on it, that's what I will cover. Okay, so I first want to make sure, was everyone able to get a gist of how to apply these different colors before we move on to the next kind of area? Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody who's particularly stuck behind, so I'm going to move on, and then there will be time to go over it again. Okay, so there are two ways to save elements or to export elements from Adobe Illustrator. Okay, the first thing is called exporting. Exporting allows you to export specific elements from your file without saving the entire file, or without exporting, basically without saving the entire file. So that's very, very cool. Because let's say we created a bunch of different designs here, and I only want to save and share one of those designs, right? So instead of sending you the entire file, I'm going to only want to I'll share with you one file. And I don't know if we have enough time to talk about the different file types, so I'm going to kind of gloss over it right now. I'll make a note of it to make sure we go over it later. So I'm going to select all of these, even better, even more simply. I'm going to select these swatches over here. Okay. And let's go to window and go down to the E. That's where it should be. What do they call it here? I'm sorry, it's under A. Okay, so I'll go to window, A, asset export, asset to our asset export window. It's going to appear on your right hand toolbar. It's going to appear as a box with an arrow moving out of the right hand corner. Okay, so asset export. So this is the window that anything that you drag into it will allow you to then export it to your desktop, any file you want, and then you could do whatever you want with that specific element, with whatever you want with that specific element. So let's take all of these squares and let's upload it. Now, what do we see, right? And all I did was drag. That's all I did. I just dragged it into it, drag and drop. Once I'm over it, and there's a little plus, which tells me that my objects are about to be let go. So what do I see? I see a bunch of squares. Now, that might look fine, but what that really is telling me is that because all these squares weren't grouped, therefore it's going to export each of those squares as individual assets. So just for demonstrative sake, let's see what happens when I do that. I'm going to select all of them, and it's very difficult to tell, but there's a thin blue line that appears over selected objects. Basically, it's kind of like a loading dock, right? You load up the elements that you want into your asset export window, and then once that happens, you have to select which of those assets you're going to complete exporting. So I want to select all of them, so I'm going to select the first one, hold shift and select the last one, and a thin blue line appears. Okay, is everyone able to access their asset export window? If you're not able to, let me know. Okay, so it doesn't seem like anyone's having a problem, which is great. It's good. So now we have these different elements. And let's familiarize ourselves right now only with a single window. And if we see, it says in like grayed out, it says format. So it says format, and it's a drop down, and there are different file types. Now, without getting into the different file types, let's select the file that says PNG. Okay, for simplicity's sake, PNG. And then once we do that, go to the bottom right corner, and it says export. And now we're just about ready to export our elements, our assets, and we get to choose where do we want it to be saved to, right? Where do we want these specific elements to be saved to? I'm going to select my desktop, okay? Select folder, and export for shapes that AI successfully complete, okay? Now, let me show you what just happened. This just appeared on my desktop, these separate squares, okay? Now, let's just say that I didn't want them to be exported as individual items, which is basically what they are, right? I could delete one of them and the rest are okay. What I wanted to do is export all of them as a single object. Maybe I want to pass this on as a file for some designer, maybe for you guys to use. All I have to do is group them. I select all of them. I can press Control G on my keyboard to group them, or I can, after selecting all of my shapes, I can right click and group. Okay. And now that I did that, I can again redo that process. But now we can see that a new asset appeared of a bunch of squares right next to each other. And now Illustrator is recognizing that I want to export my squares as a single object. And if I repeat the pattern, repeat the process of selecting the file type to be a PNG, exporting it to my desktop, and selecting that, just show you. Right now, if they're all a single file, and you can group and export as many objects as you'd like, as big as you would like. So again, let's go over how we can do that with a large size pattern. I select all of them by dragging over it, okay, making these kind of invisible dotted line over it until I select, and I'm going to the bounds that outside the bounds of my artwork, because I want to make sure that I capture everything that makes up my artwork. Select all of it, right click, group, and now I drag it into my asset export window, and we can see it's kind of small, but we can see that they're all being exported as a single object. Again, in order to you have to load it to your asset export window, and then you have to actually select which object you want to export. So you do that by making sure that you select it and that there's a blue outline around your object. Then you click export, select the folder you want to export it to. And now I have this pattern that I created as a separate object. This is not, nope. Okay. So that's one way to save things. Now this way is good for very specific elements, but it's not how you're going to save your entire Illustrator folder. The way you're going to do that, and the way you're going to do that is, yes, because it's a pre-existing folder, go to File and go to Save, or you can press Control S on your keyboard. Again, that's the File dropdown at the top right, top left. Go to Save. Now, because this file is already on my computer, nothing happens. But let's make a new thing just for the sake of it. Let's make, okay, T, great. So now I have this file. Now when I just press Control S on my keyboard, or you can go to File, Save. And the first thing the Illustrator is going to ask me is, where do I want to save it to? So I can choose, let's just say my desktop for now, okay? Next, I can change the name of my file. So let's say class blank file. And we're going to save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. We're going to talk about the different file types later, or I really want to, but we're just going to save it as an Adobe Illustrator file .ai, which is how you were able to download my shapes from the Google Drive. I uploaded an Illustrator file, and therefore it was very easy, a very simple process. And I'm going to select Save, okay? Then I'm presented with Illustrator options. And the first thing is like, what version do you want to save it in? Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to save it in Illustrator 2020. And then I usually don't touch any of these different settings. I just use default settings. It serves me well, usually. And then I press OK. And now my file has been saved on my desktop. And I can show that to you right here. Okay, you see that? Class blank file. So what does that tell me? That tells me, well, what we learned was two things. We learned how to save specific elements, and we learned how to save an entire file. So sometimes you want to save only some things and delete the file. Like I just did, I just deleted it. Okay, now was there anything else I want to go with? Yes. I also wanted to share how we could, so I wanted to share, I guess, two different things. First, I'm going to File, and I'm going to go to Save As. Okay. Now, what this means is that I'm going to save another version of this file. Okay. Well, even better, let's go to save a copy. So there's save as, which is when I save it as a different file type, but I don't want to talk about different file types just yet. And then save a copy, which basically means I want to keep this file of Illustrator as it is, and I want to make another file of Illustrator that I'll go on ahead and edit. And I just wanted to share how I name my files, because I have a lot of Adobe Illustrator files, and I have to be able to kind of work through what's what, okay? Different client work and maybe personal projects and illustrations. So this is the kind of naming convention that I use that helps me recognize and organize a bunch of different files, Illustrator files. So the first thing I do is I'll do the name of the project or the name of the client. Let's just say Waffleonia. Okay, that's the name of the client. And then I'll do the deliverable. So the deliverable is what aspect of that project, what piece of that project does this Illustrator folder represent? So let's say they hired me to do their logo, and they hired me to design their packaging, and they hired me to design their menu. Those are all different files, or I personally will keep them in all different files. They're all different mediums and different platforms. So what I'm going to do is let's say I'm designing the menu. I'm going to put it in caps, so a caps lock on your keyboard, and I'm going to write menu in caps. And then let's say this is the 4th version of the menu. I sent it to the Waffleonia people, and they're like, oh, this is great, but we want to see it in a different color, or we want to see it in a different font. So instead of deleting the file or editing it, I keep the first version as it is, and I save a copy like we're doing right now. And I'll just change the name from version 1 or V1 to V4, which would be the 4th version, right? So V4. So now in my file, in my project file, I'll have the name of the client, which will make it easy to know, to distinguish from other client work. It'll tell me that it's a menu, and it'll tell me what version this is. So let's say that this project goes on, and now we're at version 8 of the menu design. I'll know that this is version 4 and not version 8. And I'll also know that this is the menu and not the logo. And I'll also know that this is the Waffleonia client and not the NTA, right? Okay, so let's save the desktop, save. Okay, this menu again, and I'm not going to edit it at all. And now we can see, I'm just going to drag it over here. We can see Waffleonia menu version 4. And we can go on forever, right? Waffleonia menu version 16 and a half. And this is a great way to keep track of your work, keep it organized. So I wanted to share that with you. So I want to take this time to answer any outstanding questions about what we did. And I actually know that I said that we were going to we're going to go over the pen tool, but we just didn't have enough time today. Someone just asked, are we going to learn Photoshop? No, we're not going to learn Photoshop, although I'll be very happy to give you a demonstration and like show you around Photoshop. I feel uncomfortable asking people to make some kind of financial commitment for Photoshop, which is more money a month. So yeah, if you have access to it, I can point you in the direction of some great tutorials that you could follow along with. And that if we do use Photoshop, it's going to be very limited kind of demonstration of what's possible with it, or the different ways I might use it within a design project. But the plain answer is that we are not going to go in depth into learning Photoshop. Okay. Any other outstanding questions? So someone asked that someone said they can't find the color swatches panel. So let's be specific. There's the color window and the swatches window. They're different windows. Okay, they're different windows. You might be able to see one and not the other. But the way to access both of them is go to their Windows drop-down panel. And let me show you exactly how to do that. We're in Illustrator, the top left-hand panel, Window. And we scroll down till we click Swatches. And then we have this flyout. What I have is this flyout window over here that says Swatches. And then if I want to see the color, I go open my Windows panel again, select color. This should be your first step. If you can't see something that you expect to find, you should go to Window and make sure that you could, if you can turn that window on or make it visible, that should be how you do it. And then someone asked, if you want to be a graphic designer, do you need to know Photoshop? Technically, you don't need to know any programs to be a graphic designer. But yes, industry standard is that you'll know Photoshop, and industry standards that you'll know InDesign, and you'll know a lot of things. But I want to start off by learning one program well and being very comfortable in it, and learning how to design within it, because knowing a bunch of programs won't make you a good designer, just like having a very fancy camera won't make you a good photographer. You have to know how to use the software, and you have to know the basics and the principles. In addition to that, the limitations of this course is that it can't require people. This course was presented as a financially, there's no financial obligations. And I know that's a little unfair considering that you have to have Illustrator to use this, but I think Illustrator was the bare minimum that I could get away with, and also the maximum. I can't ask people to download or pay for programs when that was not really a requirement of the course. When you loaded, someone said that when they loaded their swatches, it came under a graphics tab. I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but let's. So there's graphic styles, which is different than swatches, okay? Graphic styles is a completely different story. It's basically a way to apply a whole bunch of effects to a shape. It's not a swatch, although it could be, but it's not. It's more complex than that. So what you want to do is you want to upload your swatches or your colors to something called swatches, and you'll know that you're doing that because it says swatches on top. Is there anything I can explain about what we went over today? Okay, someone raised their hand. Hi, you had a question?
Yeah, okay. So in the design that you gave here with all the circles and the, all the shapes.
Sure.
every time I tried selecting one and then like making, let's say, all the triangles the same color, the entire screen turned that color. So
Oh, okay. So first I want to say that I don't know what it looks like on your end, but what you might be doing is first, is it possible that everything is grouped and maybe you have to ungroup it?
okay,
So you would right click on it, you right click on the shape you're trying to edit and make sure that everything is ungrouped.
oh, so you right click on it and then what? And how do you
And then you see, if you look at my screen, right? When I right clicked, I see a bunch of options, right?
right, right,
So let me make sure, let me show you. So if I right click on a couple of shapes, there's an ability to group. So I want to make sure that it's ungrouped. That's the first thing I would want to make sure that all your shapes are ungrouped.
1 second. I don't see such a choice.
So let's go over this slowly. Okay, so this is the file. This is the black and white file, right?
Right. Okay.
Okay, so when you select a shape, is this what you see? Do you see a single shape with this little?
Right. Right.
That's what
Yeah.
you see. And then
Yeah.
when you change the color,
right. So that particular one changes. But then if I want to select now all the triangles and make them yellow, how would I do that?
you would go into each triangle and I don't know. What I would do is I would go into each triangle and I would change the color.
Each one separately.
Yes. Or you could hold shift and select, kind of like we spoke about this last class, is that when you hold shift and then you select a couple of objects, it kind of selects them all at the same time. So that's how I'm doing this. I'm selecting a single triangle and then I'm holding shift, keeping shift held down on my keyboard. I'm going to select other shapes. And as long as my finger is down on the shift key, I'm able to select as many shapes as I like. And then when I let go of shift, I have all of those selected. And then I could change their color. I can make it, right? So I did this by using shift.
I see.
So did that solve the problem?
Yeah, that's one question I wanted to know. And then again, when you selected that whole, that all the blue colors, like the types of colors, could you show again how you did that? So you copied you made a bunch of squares, right? You copied,
yeah.
And then you changed each one to a different color, or?
Yes. So what we did is we adjusted the saturation, which is like the intensity of the color, and we changed the brightness of the color.
So how did you do that again?
Okay, so we did that by pulling up our color panel. So I go to Window, and then I go to Color, and this little window over here comes up. Okay,
Right.
but also what we see over here is not this is something else. This is CMYK, but we want to change something called the HSB. Okay, so there are a few steps here, but it could get kind of intuitive. It could get very intuitive and quick. So we go to color, we go to this little hamburger menu, right? We see these three horizontal lines, and then we go to HSB. See that?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I select it, and now I'm in something called the hue, saturation, brightness mode. And that allows me to edit the specific, it allows me to edit the hue, which is another word for color. It allows me to edit the saturation, which is the richness, the intensity of it. And finally, B for brightness allows me to change how light and dark it is. And by moving the bottom two sliders, I was able to create these range of colors. You see? And it's pretty much like I moved up and down the spectrum to get from light to dark.
Right, but the actual colors you had selected on your own, or how did it go from light to dark? You picked one color and then?
So I made it. The program Illustrator didn't do this for me. I just made a square and I filled it with light blue. And then
Right.
I went to the left and I made it lighter. I moved, let's see. Okay, let's say this is my default. That's what I start with.
Right.
And now I'm going to make two squares to the okay. Two squares to the left are going to be lighter and two squares to the right are going to be darker. So I pull up my color window again, the way I'm going to edit it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start by adding brightness to it, okay? I add brightness to it. And I want to make them a little washed out, kind of like pastel colors, very soft. So I'm also going to remove some of the color intensity, which is done by moving the saturation slider, which is the middle slider, and I'm moving it towards the left, right? And the more left I move it to, the more white or the more light gray it becomes.
Yeah, but I me what's happening. I have like 5 squares just like you, but they all the same color. They turned all the same color. That's the problem.
Are they grouped?
No, they're not grouped together. I just selected the center one.
I'm not sure.
Select the center one, and then you just kind of move that S or that B.
That's right. So S for saturation, B for brightness.
So nothing happens to those squares. Are they all supposed to be selected or not?
No, they're not. They're not all meant to be selected. We're changing one square at a time. That's what I did here. I changed each square at a time.
Okay. So you just okay. So you just move it a drop more, and then you go to the next, and then you move it some more.
Exactly. It just eyeballed it, meaning what looks good to me may not look good to you, and you may think, oh, that's really ugly, and it's pretty much figuring out what looks good to you. But the challenge here is how can we keep them all based on the same color? We're just changing how light and dark they are, but we're not changing it to red or green or anything like that. So and this is something called the monochromatic, right? Monochromatic meaning we use a single color as the base, and we're just slight variations to it to create a color palette that looks interesting, but is also very cohesive.
So then how did you go now when you have all these colors selected now? How did you go changing the board?
So there are two ways to do it, right? We spoke about using the eyedropper tool a little bit,
right.
Which basically means that you select the object you want to edit. This is the kind of the tedious way to do it. You select the object you want to edit. You can press I on your keyboard to pull up this little tool, eyedropper tool.
Right.
And now I can go and click on the color I want to kind of grab. So we see that my eyedropper tool is hovering over this light blue. I just tap, and now my selected shape has adopted that color. So that's one way to do it. Now, the more professional way to do it is to, and this is what I did over here. I open my swatches panel now. Open my swatches panel, and right, do you see that?
Right.
Okay. And then I select all the colors that I would like to import into my swatches panel. So let's just say for this that I wanted to import these two colors only. So then I bring my attention to the bottom right area. Let's just move this over so we don't get confused. And we see this folder, right? And I hover over it, it says new color group. And if I select that, and I don't really have to change, these are the default settings. I'm going to keep it at that just for this demonstration. select OK, and now it's in there, and now it's treated like any other color.
I see. And then like single-handedly, each shape you select and then you pick the color. Is that?
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Mhm.
There are more automated ways to do it, and perhaps we'll go over it, but this is how we're going to introduce the very basic way the Illustrator handles color.
Okay, I get you. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Okay. Someone said, if they're not able to attend a lesson, how can they make it up? So the person who handles these courses, kind of my boss, is Rabbi Yeshua Wardy, and he has kind of a policy about recording. So you have to reach out to him and talk to him about it. But the general policy is that recordings are only available on an what would be the phrase? Like when you need it, on a need basis, on a need-based basis. So the idea would be to reach out to Rabbi Wordy directly, and I believe that he has emailed you at the beginning of the course. Okay, so that is the end for today's class. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a good night.